Okay, well, welcome to the Quixotic Heights Podcast, where we climb a new perspective through series of resilience, identity, and creativity. Today, I'm honored to sit down with Bill Hulseman. He's an educator, a ritual designer, and author of the memoir, Six to Carry the Casket and One to Say the Mass, Reflections on Life, Identity, and Moving Forward. Bill is from Chicago and also the East Coast. He now lives in Seattle, and he's the youngest of 10 children. Grew up in a large Irish Catholic family, navigating questions of faith and identity, and coming out as a gay man. In 2019, I believe it was, he turned to writing as a way to process grief, burnout, and the search for meaning. So in this conversation, we'll explore the intersections of loss and healing, the power of rituals, which I'm really curious about, and what it truly means to move forward after heartbreak. So with that, Bill, welcome to Quixotic Heights. How are you today?
I'm great. I'm very happy for the invitation. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I always like to kick it off with asking the guests, what was your quixotic dream or defining moment that got you to today?
Yeah. I don't think I ever thought of myself as a dreamer. But when you posed the question to me, that's the core question for your podcast, it really did get me thinking. Uh, what was the big dream that I was pursuing? I think I didn't admit it for a long time, but I did have this little dream hidden away somewhere in my mind or in my soul that finally found form the last few years. I think when I was a kid, when I was in high school and college, I thought I was going to be an author. I thought I was also going to take a very different career path.
Mm,
And I thought I was going to write a book. I wanted to be an author. I wanted to be able to say I am a published author. And but at that time, I thought it was probably going to be a book of theology because I was studying religion. I was doing a lot of work in the comparative study of religion, and so I thought I was going to write something about that. And then when I took a different career tack and I moved toward teaching high school,
mm.
then I thought, well, maybe someday I'll write a book about teaching high school, about the courses that I teach, or building community, or school culture, or something like that. And then 2019 is when I left education after some significant burnout, and I kind of forgot about any ambition to write a book. I forgot about any ambition at all because I was in such a tough place. And and like you said, after 2019, I gave myself time to heal and recover from some significant grief. I lost three family members in the space of a year and a half. And I was doing the hardest job I'd ever done. I was a middle school principal.
Mm.
God bless all of the middle school principals and all of the educators in the world, but I have especially deep compassion for middle school leaders. And I really burned out with that combination of a very difficult job, very hard and demanding job, and then all this grief, and I had no resources. I had nothing to lean back on at that point.
Yeah.
And so I took time off to heal and to recover and to figure out. I wanted to understand what got me to that place of burnout. But by that time, it was 2020, and 2020 happened to all of us. So I didn't want to just understand how did I land here? I wanted to understand how do we all land here? How do we
Mm.
all land in this place of chaos and discord and tribalism and hatred? So I started unpacking. Yeah, I wasn't qualified to unpack the big questions, so I started unpacking the questions that were about my life and what were the relationships, what were the experiences that really shaped me and how I saw the world. Um, Starting there it helped me understand what was going on, throughout the world, what was happening on a bigger scale. But I started writing and sharing short essays in my weekly newsletter. I'd started a small consulting practice around ritual design, and I started writing just to process stuff for myself. I needed to do something with all that pain and all that grief that had been sitting there, but I was also at a moment of reinvention. I'm a lot like Madonna. I go through a new phase and I want to reinvent myself. I want to peel back a layer. And and see what part of me is ready for the world and what's going to help me move forward. So that's what I wanted to find is who was that person that was waiting, who was waiting to
Yeah.
emerge. After a couple of years of writing those short essays, then I stepped back and recognized a line through a lot of the essays about identity, about how to, what were the things that shaped me, but also what are the things that shape all of us, and what do we do when the identities that are given to us don't serve us anymore? What do we do when the identities given to us restrict us more than they liberate or facilitate, living. So, what do I do with that? And so putting the book together, from these essays, and I saw that line, and then I saw the bigger story about how did I build my identity, and how do I want to build my identity moving forward? And that's the book that emerged. And that was, the moments where I would doubt, like, no, nobody's gonna read this. No, I'm not a writer. I'm not like, no, I'm not an interesting enough person to merit a memoir. Um, but I came to recognize that, we all need to process this, and not everybody has the tools of reflection at their fingertips that I do. The quirk of my own education, my own family, my own kind of style of moving through the world. Reflection is really important to me, and it's a really important tool. So I wanted to offer it to other people to say, yeah, it's worth the time to it's worth the time to look at your life critically and look at your life compassionately, and to take the reins, not just giving up and saying, "Oh, well, I guess I'm stuck in this for the next 40 years, so I'll just suck it up and go." I think there's the outcome of all that reflection is a kind of freedom that I just hadn't felt before. But when I doubted whether the book was worthy, or when I doubted whether anybody might be interested in it, I think there was that little thing that was hidden in the back of my mind, or hiding in my soul, saying, "No, no, no! Remember, you always wanted to publish a book."
Yes, and now you're a
And
published author.
there it is. Yeah,
Great. Yeah.
yeah. So that was my dream, and parts of it were kind of a nightmare. But
Mhm.
I, and as much as I would never want to relive any of that pain, I also am really grateful that it did get me kind of through that moment of transformation, and it going back to and unpacking all that. It did lead me to where I am right now.
Yeah. There's a lot of power in writing our story, to let go of some of that pain or to navigate through it, right? Because
Mm.
you and I have similar paths in the respect that I quit my corporate job in 2017 when my mom passed away, and left the corporate space of Microsoft and T-Mobile, and started writing my mom's story. And that's how
Mm.
I became a writer as well. So I understand a little bit about what you went through. So,
Yeah.
share with us a little bit about how you were able to, I mean, what was the most difficult part, I guess, of turning your grief into words, into a book?
I think for me, the most difficult piece of it was believing that anybody would want to read it, believing that anybody would find, value in it. And I think I think that's a doubt that a lot of us face. Especially when that kind of transformation is spurred by grief, and pain. It's hard to want to lean into that. It's hard to
Mhm.
want to retell the story for myself, never mind for others. Um, I think I was able to get over that hurdle because I was getting positive responses from people, that I had written a really tough essay, and I posted it on the socials, and that it later evolved into an essay that landed in the book. But I got a lot of really powerful responses from people, not saying like, "Oh my God, I never knew that about you," but saying, "Oh, I'm so glad you told that story. It's made me look at my own grief
Mm.
differently. It made me look at my own loss or my own challenges differently." And I thought, well, okay, that's valuable. If that's giving people, it's not just me gazing at my navel and thinking about my own life. It's Yeah, we can all benefit from that kind of reflection. And I was really happy to see that it was serving that, for
Mhm.
people. But yeah, so that got me through the hard part of a lack of confidence.
Mhm.
Um,
Good.
Beyond that, the hardest part was reliving hard moments, and sometimes it was really difficult reliving the good moments too. Sometimes it was I would find myself at a coffee shop working on an essay or revising and trying to pull some things together, and I would just find myself weeping in the middle of a coffee shop over my laptop. Um, but it was because those feelings never really went away. Those experiences never really went away. They're all right under the surface, and it was sometimes it was really heartening to know how closely some experiences have stayed with me, and sometimes it was really kind of scary to see that that was so quickly accessed. That pain is still there, or that dark memory is still there.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. But
How did
writing
you
the book and putting
decide?
the book together gave me a chance to process it and frame it and understand what I can do with it. And it's really helped me make peace with a lot of the
Mm.
darker times in life.
And how did you decide what to keep, and what to take out in your story?
Mm. I wanted to tell my story. I didn't want to tell anybody else's story. I didn't want to put words in anybody else's mouth. And those moments where I felt like I was, I write a lot about my parents, and when I felt like I was putting words into their mouths, that's when I pulled back. Then or I write a lot about my siblings, and I was putting words in their mouths. I'm like, no, they saw those experiences really differently. They have it, they can write their own book. They can tell their own story. I don't need to tell their story for them. I just wanted to focus on what was my experience and how did it impact me. And that created a really healthy line for me to say, oh, that I'm trying to tell somebody else's story. Easy to take that out and move forward with just
Yeah,
focusing on mine.
yeah, that's great. And you lost three members of your family in just a year and a half. How were you able to get up and function each day other than, having the writing? What other things or people kept you going?
Hmm. I'm not sure I was functioning particularly well
Yeah.
for a while. I had been working for that job. I had my sights set on school leadership for a long time, and I was really so excited uh, to step into that role. And my mom died 2 days before the school year started, my first year as a middle school principal. And I remember thinking at the time, oh, she always had such good timing. Like she always was really good at reminding me of my priorities. And so here I thought I was going into the best job I'd ever had. I was all excited. I was, maybe a little cocky about that. And she died 2 days before, and I thought, well, that's mom humbling me once again. It was, and she had died after a long illness, and so we were expecting it, and it was still hard. It was still painful, especially to walk through the last few months with her as she was declining.
Mhm.
Um, but my dad had had a stroke about a year before she died, and he was pretty severely debilitated, so he required a lot of care. So my whole family was in crisis mode, right?
Mhm.
So taking care of both of my parents as they were declining, and my dad required significant care. Uh, and so, uh, anytime I had a long weekend, anytime I had a vacation, I could take a couple days off, I was back in Chicago, and doing what I thought was right, and I don't regret any of that. But it was exhausting psychologically and physically and that's nothing to what my siblings who were living nearby, what they were experiencing, because they were taking my care of my parents on a daily basis. So I was never really 100% in any location. I think it was hard to function fully and heal because I didn't have that space. I was always back in Chicago to help take care of my dad after my mom died. And then my sister died very suddenly, a year after my mom died, and that really sent my whole family careening. None of us really expected this. It was such a shock. And then my dad died a few months after that. Uh, Work, a lot of people talk about work being a place for healing. And for me, it was worse. It was triggering. It was I could never really get my feet on the ground at work. And so work did not get me through. For the first time in my life, I woke up and I didn't want to go to school. Like that had no, in 40 years, that had never happened to me. I didn't want to go to school. And I thought, okay, this is something has broken. When I was able to finally give myself time and space, I imposed a sabbatical on myself. I said, I'm going to take a year off. I'm not going to think about work. I'm just going to focus on being well. Also, in that time, I moved up from Tacoma to Seattle. My husband and I got married. We merged, houses and started our life together. I don't, uh, I don't know that I would have healed and recovered if I didn't have a new life to build. I
Mm.
had something new to build. I had something new to grow and to feed me and to sustain me that wasn't work. And that was the first time in a really long time that I had something out of work that was so life-giving for me. So I really thank my husband for walking that journey with me. And like he met me when I was at
Yeah.
my worst and he
Did
still
a
wanted to
lot.
hang out.
You did a lot in that time frame because, starting a new job is stressful, getting married, moving, stressful. Of course, losing your family members, stressful. And then right on the cusp of the pandemic, stressful. So,
Yeah, we
um,
joked that when everybody else shut down, like, oh, everybody's coming to join me on my self-imposed sabbatical. Isn't that nice that everybody's stopped working too? But because we had just got married, we got through it by framing it as a gift from the universe as an extended honeymoon. So we basically spent 2 years not really seeing a whole lot of people. And at that time, our dog Stella was alive, and the three of us were just on the couch for I don't know how many hours a day, entwined with each other. I think that's how we took care of each other and got through the pandemic. It was
yeah,
at
yeah.
least I was able to put so much down to be able to sit still and be well, even as the world was falling apart.
Yeah, hey, those staycations are valuable. They're amazing. So
Amen.
for you all. Um, so you grew up in a pretty large family. What was your particular role in this family, and how did that shape your voice and your identity?
My I'm so deeply impacted by my family. So I'm the youngest of 10, but I'm also kind of an only child. The first nine were all born within 11 years of each other. And so I can you imagine my parents like just child, 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 child. Uh, and then there was a 7 year gap, and then I was born. So
Mm.
some people would say, like, oh, you were a mistake. And I say, no, I was a delightful surprise. Thank you very much. But yeah, so I got a little bit of the big family experience and I got a little bit of the only child experience. So, with my siblings, with the kind of big family, I was peripheral, I was
Mhm.
ornamental. My oldest siblings were always just kind of sent to take care of me. By the time I was speaking, the first few were out of the house. They were in college and working and beyond. And um, so we had really different experiences. I think back to that, like what my oldest siblings must have thought, being 20 years old and having a toddler for a little brother, like, oh, do I have to take care of that? Like, like,
Did that
but the
delay their decision making in a
uh,
process in terms of having kids?
some of them possibly, others went right into it, and they started having a lot of kids real fast. So, um, yeah. But as a big family, as part of a big family, I was kind of peripheral. I was ornamental. Anytime I would say something, if it was coherent and intelligent, some of the siblings would look at me like, where did he come from? Like, what is that? But as an only child, I also got a lot of quality time with my parents that my
Mm.
older siblings just didn't get. But I also met my parents at a different stage of life too. They were older parents by the time I was born. Uh, And so they were a lot more relaxed in a lot of ways. They saw the first nine. They had their own education in raising children with the first nine. So I think they relaxed a lot more with me. But I
Mm-hmm.
also wasn't a boundary pusher. I wasn't breaking a lot of rules. I wasn't rebelling in any profound way. So I was pretty easy, and I had a pretty good relationship, pretty close with relationship with my parents.
That's wonderful.
Um, but yeah, I think all of that shaped me in really profound ways. I still grapple with that feeling of always being on the outside, never quite being fully accepted, never quite being fully part of a group. I still struggle sometimes, uh, really believing that I belong places. And I think in part it's a my experience growing up in a big family, and in part it's growing up gay, and just always knowing you're on the outside, but not really having vocabulary for it
Mhm.
until later in life. And but it instilled in me this sense that I'm always on the outside, or I'm always on the edge, looking in, not always trying to get in, but I'm on the edge. And I
Mhm.
think that shapes my identity a lot. As a
Yeah.
teacher, I recognized that that prepared me to keep an eye out for the kids who were on the margins.
Mhm.
I was a campus minister and I was a teacher. I was always really drawn to, and I think kids were drawn to me when they were on the margins in some way, whether it was because socially they felt like they were on the outs, they didn't feel like they connected with people. Queer kids who were grappling with it, didn't have vocabulary to talk about it, found themselves hanging out in my office a lot or wanting to talk to me. And I had a specific empathy for the kids who were systematically excluded from things, or I could see the struggles that I could recognize things in my own students that they weren't recognizing in themselves yet.
Yeah.
And
How,
that way it enabled me to see it and maybe help, or may offer or create a context where they could feel some peace, some belonging. So
yeah. I'm curious to know how you picked up on those cues, how you identified those who were on the margins or who needed help, because, a lot of times we're good at hiding things. A lot of times teachers are so busy with the big classroom, they don't necessarily see that.
yeah.
What was your method?
I was, I wasn't sort of a conventional classroom teacher. I did have classes, but I was also in my first job as an educator, I was a campus minister and a teacher. As a campus minister, I didn't have just a focus on the kids who were in my classes and their academic progress. I was also, my portfolio was the entire student body, and so it was my responsibility to get to know everybody and create experiences, create spaces for people to come together, for us to build community, for us to reflect. Um, so it was a really fast education in teaching because I had to get to know a lot of kids fast, and I had to have a lot of really strong and attractive programming ready to go to give kids really good experiences. Um, Once I think I was able to demonstrate that I was trustworthy to kids,
Hmm.
um, then they would start revealing themselves to me. Then they would peel back a layer and let them know about some secret wish they've always had, or some pain that they're grappling with, or some situation that they're having trouble navigating. So it wasn't necessarily that I could see it. It was almost like they taught me how to see it. My students who gravitated toward me were the ones who are like, oh, I do have something I can offer you. Yes, I do have language that I can give you that I didn't have when I was your age, and I'm happy to walk this with you.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, my first students were great teachers for me, and they helped me identify kids as years went on. And it wasn't just me. I didn't have some sort of magical insight. Teaching is most fun when it's collaborative and you're working with other teachers who, we all have different perspective on kids. Um, and one of my favorite things every week were the grade level meetings that we would have with all the teachers of the ninth grade would gather And we'd highlight any kids who were struggling or highlight any kids who were having incredible growth or success. And we would talk about it and talk meaningfully about it. And if there was a problem, we would figure out, do we need to intervene? Do we need to strategize? Do we need to call in some support? And for the kids who were celebrated, we wanted to uplift them in a way that was meaningful to them and felt appropriate to them. Um, so it wasn't just me learning how to see. It was the whole team approach, and I really loved working with colleagues that I trusted who all had really different. They all had different life experiences. They could all see different things in different kids the way that I could.
Mhm.
Um, a lot of my colleagues helped me recognize, like, look to your own history, look to your own, remember your own adolescence. When you're talking to a 15-year-old, like, remember what it was like to be 15, not to talk down to them, but with empathy to say, like, yeah, I remember how hard it is to be walking through the world when you're 15, never mind the rest of the stuff that's dumped on you. So
Yeah.
I think all of that helped me to recognize what my students needed.
That's great. And thank you for not only being an educator, but also, creating that safe space and providing the agency for these kids to find their own voice and their own path. That's very beautiful. Would you be willing to share a little bit about, your journey in terms of coming out and when you
Mhm.
knew you were gay?
I think I always knew I was gay, and I think I didn't know what that meant. I was born in the 70s, and I by the time I was in a Catholic grade school, nobody was talking about it. Nobody had the vocabulary for it. But I always felt like I was on the outside. I always felt like I just didn't fit. I just didn't connect, particularly with the other boys in my class. I never understood what I still don't. I was a middle school principal. I still don't understand boys. Uh, it it was terrifying for me as a kid because you're trying to navigate that and all I knew was that I'm not interested in that stuff. I'm more interested in the stuff that the girls were doing over there. Why can't I hang out with them? And I didn't understand I didn't understand the firm gender divide between boys and girls and what boys are supposed to do and girls are supposed to do. Um, so I can remember feeling very kind of lost and spinning, but having no language, no vocabulary. I couldn't point to anybody in my family or in my world that at the time was out, and so I didn't know what the options were. I just thought I was weird. I just thought I was on the outside. I think I started to understand around 13, around I was 12 or 13, maybe eighth grade, I started to understand, like, oh, I wouldn't have called it my sexual identity then, but I thought, oh, this is the difference. This is what has made me feel different for so long.
Mhm.
But again, I didn't have any place to explore. I didn't have any place to ask people about it. Everything that you do in school is heteronormative, right? The dances that you go to, it's all about training people to date other straight people and then get married and have more straight babies. And so all the traditions, all the things that we think are so essential to growing up, they're so heavily gendered and they're so heteronormative that even with those things, I didn't find any channels. I thought when I got to high school, I finally had language for it. I finally understood like what gay meant, and I understood that that applied to me. And then on the first day of high school, and I think I really thought I was going to come out in high school. But on the first day of high school, I went to an all boys Catholic high school. There were 1,500 boys in this school. So you can imagine how it smelled. Um, so on the first day of classes, uh, somebody I'd never met before, I was about to walk up the stairs, and he was walking down the stairs with a couple other people, and he just pushed me against the wall and shoved me up and kind of held me up by the collar and spit the
Mm.
word faggot in my face
Mm.
and then walked away. And the interaction lasted for maybe 7 seconds, and it remains with me to this day because that was the message. Like, oh, not coming out here. Okay,
Yeah.
I guess I'll wait till college. So I just put a plug in it, and I waited till college. Um, when I got to college, I didn't feel that fear. I felt like I was in a safer place. I had friends who were more open. People were actually talking about it on campus. There was a group of students on campus that were organizing to, other queer students who were organizing to connect and build community. So when I got to college, I was able to come out to friends. And then after my freshman year in college, my sister Patty, who's number nine, in among the 10 of us, I was back in Chicago, and Patty called. She and her friends were going to the Pride Parade, and she called and said, "Hey, do you want to come down to the Pride Parade?" I'm like, why? What do you know? Like who told? Uh, and she was genuinely just going to the Pride Parade with her friends to be a supportive ally presence. I thought, well, I think that's a door that just opened for me. Isn't that nice? So I
Mhm.
went to the parade with her and her friends, and then afterward we went to get something to eat, and and I took that opportunity to come out to my sister Patty and told her, shared that part of me with her. And it was kind of embedded in a story. I was trying to explain something. I'm like, well, see, I'm gay, and da 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 da. And Patty said, "Oh, now that makes sense." And her friend Beth said, "Did you just hear what he said?" And she went, "Oh my God, yeah, that's great, wonderful." So we had this lovely moment. And then the second thing she said was, "Okay, who can I tell?" So we strategized, big family dynamics, right? We strategized who was safe with the information, and who was gonna let it leak to mom and dad. And I wasn't ready to talk to mom and dad yet. Um, but with Patty's help, I was able to build an alliance within the family. I didn't have to have the conversation 15 times with family. It's just I let Patty disseminate the information. Um, and then the summer before my junior year, yeah, I think it was the summer before my junior year is when I decided to come out to my parents. And I I think they knew, and I think I knew they knew, but we had to have the conversation. My mom was dropping hints at me right and left. Like there was a spot in the kitchen where I would drop my keys if I got mail. Everybody in a big house, everybody's got their spot. Everybody in a big family, everyone has their little spot. They're always going to check that for their mail. If you lost something, you drop in that. So my mom kept leaving things in that spot. One day she left a CD of La Cage aux Folles, the musical, which is like the gayest musical on earth. It's about a drag club. It was the inspiration for the Birdcage, if you've ever seen the Birdcage. So La Cage aux Folles, the CD is sitting there, and I thought, oh God, it's a trap. She explained that she was at a luncheon or something, and this was like a door prize. It was a Broadway theme, so everybody got a different musical. And she said, "Oh, I thought you'd enjoy this."
Mhm.
Like I'm not budging. So bit by bit, we were dropping hints at each other, and then we had a day I was able to have the conversation. She was ready for it. That doesn't mean that there were fewer tears, but I was ready for it. I anticipated what she was gonna be worried about, and I also anticipated that she was gonna be open to growth. There's such just something. I just knew that she was gonna be able to work through it, but I knew that we had to start somewhere. So I told my mom, and she cried. And one of the first things she asked was, "Well, what about the church? What about what the church teaches about this?" And I was ready for that. I had been studying religion. I'd been studying that space in theology for a long time. And I cited her. I said, "You always emphasize the primacy of conscience, and that when my conscience says it's right, no matter what anybody else says, whether it's even the Pope could tell me. But if my conscience says it's not right, then I need to listen to my conscience." Which is it's one of the it's a loophole in Catholic theology. It's sort of civil disobedience, like Catholic style.
Mhm.
Um, and my mom always really emphasized it, that your conscience is the primary guide and the last line of decision making. Um, and I said,
Great.
in my conscience, in my heart, I know this is how God made me, and I hope the rest of the world can catch up. Like, and
Wow.
my,
Well,
my
thank you for
dad came home
sharing
a couple
that.
hours later, and then we had the conversation. It took a couple of weeks for my mom to stop crying because I think she was grieving, the life that she had imagined for me, that I was no longer going to be living. Um, but she had to grieve that. She had to let go of that to be able to see me for who I was becoming and who I
Mhm.
wanted to be, and to be able to walk that with me. I think a lot of people are not able to do that because they don't want to grieve. They don't want to let go of, when their friends or their children come out. It is painful. It is a form of grief and loss,
Mhm.
but you have to grieve to be able to grow from it. And I think my mom knew that. She had to grieve and let go of who I wasn't going to be anymore so that she could love who I was going to be.
Mm. Yeah, that's very scary and brave. Brave for both of you, for your whole family, actually. So, okay, before we actually have you do a reading from your book, I want to hold space for Madonna because you mentioned Madonna. I grew tell me why she's important in your life.
Well, Madonna and I have had a long and wonderful relationship. She doesn't know it, but she's played a huge role in mine. I read an essay about her in the third section of the book, which is all different subjects, places and people and um, the art, movies, TV shows that helped me understand and shape my queer identity. That gave me language to see myself or to understand myself, and where I could see myself reflected in the world when I couldn't elsewhere. Madonna is one of the greats for me because the first time I saw one of her music videos, I think it was Open Your Heart, and it was on like the local music video hour on one of the local channels, like channel 44 in Chicago. And after school music video hour, and there was Open Your Heart, and little Bill watching the screen, there's something about, like, I just knew that she was my girl, and there was something deep inside. In the gay community, we call it the OGTs, the original gay traits, those things that you do when you're a kid and you have no idea why you're doing it. Like, why was I obsessed with musical theater by the time I was 7? I don't know, it must be an OGT. So Madonna was one of my OGTs, that she was
Mhm.
very early, my diva. um, I don't know why, but I always was drawn toward how bold she was. She didn't reject her Catholic identity. She embraced it and like transformed it. She did something with it. She wasn't willing to let other people tell her who she was. She wanted to create something for herself. I feel like something in my soul wanted that too. And so I stuck to Madonna for a long time. And then when I was in divinity school, I took a course on the intersection of eroticism and mysticism in different religious cultures and different spaces around the world. And so my professor had designed this course where we were exploring that intersection in all these different contexts, but each of us was doing independent research as well. And I picked Madonna because a couple years before she had released Ray of Light,
Mm.
which was innovative in a lot of ways, especially because she was bringing explicit religious imagery and spirituality into dance music, into pop music. Uh, and it wasn't just her Catholic language and her Catholic imagery that she had invoked before. It was also, she was in her Hindu phase and she was getting into Kabbalah. And so she was bringing in a lot of Hindu and Kabbalah ideas and imagery into the album. So I thought that was going to be fun to explore. I had no idea that that was only going to like deepen my obsession with Madonna. I was not jaded at all from the research, but I found this whole body of research called Madonna Studies. All these scholars from the 80s and 90s, anthropologists, sociologists, gender theorists, feminist critics, pop cultural critics, like theologians, philosophers. Nobody knew what to do with her because she defied all the categories. She defied what roles women had played in the music industry up to that point. She wasn't limiting herself to just music. She kind of pioneered the music video as a new art form to bring in a lot of different disciplines and talents. And so, so that I fell down that rabbit hole of Madonna studies, and I have just never come back. I turned that into a 28-page research paper, and then I turned it into lessons in my high school classes, and then I turned it into professional development workshops, and I've done, every couple of years I offer a Madonna symposium, like a 5-week kind of class on looking at Madonna's impact. Now, it's not about Madonna Louise, Ciccone, the person. For me, it's like Madonna, the composite of musicians and stylists and designers and everybody who's involved in the production, but they're all depending on her talent and they are all driven by her vision. And through that, she has moved the needle in global culture, like not single-handedly with the whole team, but as an entity, Madonna has moved the needle in global culture. Whether you love her or hate her, I think that's interesting. I think that's worth paying attention to. And it's a reminder of how powerful pop culture can be, not just for, little gay boys like me who are looking for some sort of inspiration or like, oh, somebody might believe I belong here. But across the board, she's demonstrated how pop culture so powerfully impacts individuals and communities, and she's uplifted um, artists on the margins, and her collaborations are very deliberate. She wants to bring in people. She wants to share her platform. And I continue to find that really inspiring and really powerful. I did a presentation at Microsoft a couple years ago for their Pride observances, and it was all on Zoom. And we did an hour session, and I wanted to look at Madonna as a queer ally. They were talking about allyship at Microsoft in their diversity programming at that time. And so they wanted to some way to explore, what does allyship look like? So we looked at Madonna and looked at early in her career. She was the white savior, dancing, like a prayer, dancing in front of the gospel choir. She was Michelle Pfeiffer at the front of the classroom. She was the white savior, but it got people's attention. And then over time, she shared her platform side by side, like on Vogue. She was side by side with the dancers and the artists of the ballroom in Harlem. But then fast forward years later to her Madam X album and Dark Ballet. The video for Dark Ballet, have you ever seen the video for Dark Ballet?
I
It's
have.
so good.
It
And
is.
it's so interesting and it's so groundbreaking. But you barely see Madonna. You hear her voice because it's her song, but you barely see her, and she's veiled. She's a witness to the execution of Joan of Arc. But Joan of Arc is played by Mickey Blanco, who is a trans person of color and an artist and an activist. So she literally gave her stage over to tell the story. I think that's what allyship, that's how allyship has sort of evolved, and she's been able to
Mhm.
demonstrate, like, yeah, sometimes you need to step up to defend other people. Sometimes you need to be side by side, and sometimes you need to get out of the way. And that was a powerful message. So yeah, so Madonna and I have a long and fruitful relationship.
Well,
Someday,
hashtag
maybe I'll
Madonna
actually
and
meet
tag her
her.
on this episode. Maybe she'll respond. I think that's beautiful, and thank you for sharing that. I agree. I grew up with Madonna. I think she's amazing, and I always believe that one of the best things you can do with your platform and being a leader is knowing who to follow. And to your point of stepping aside and letting others shine and let their voice do what
Mm,
they need to do. That to me is what also a leader is all about. But well, I'm
amen.
glad we held space for Madonna, but let's hold some space for your book. Do you have your book with you? Maybe you can do a reading for us.
I'd be happy to.
Yay.
I'd like to read the opening of the essay uh, that the book takes its name from. So, six to carry the casket, one to say the mass.
Okay.
Um, so this is the last essay in the first section of the book, and the first section of the book is really about my most formative relationships and experiences. So a lot about my family, a lot about my childhood. At this point, you've met my mom through a couple different essays, but this essay is really about my mom. So this is the start of that essay. Okay, six to carry the casket and one to say the mass. My mother had a way with words. At a party to celebrate her 80th birthday, I was nominated, read instructed, by my older sisters to give a toast. While some might have raised a glass to her accomplishments or highlight peak moments from the previous 7 decades, that, I thought, wasn't what she'd want to hear. Nor was it the most accurate, most authentic way to portray her. So instead of a walk down memory lane or a gush of superlatives, I decided to share some of her greatest hits, the phrases that made their way into our memories, or at least into my memory. And since then, When I want to summon her memory or channel her wisdom, I don't return to photos. I return to her words. Hers weren't zingers or one-liners aimed at anyone in particular. They were observational, almost footnotes that filled in the missing links to conversations or ideas, or that efficiently and wittily wrapped them up. She was succinct, and sometimes she was too succinct, offering only an occasional to let you know she was still listening. Her phrasing was pithy. She made you think quickly to discern the hidden joke, which wasn't always clarified by her tone or gesture. And her deadpan was convincing. Most of her recurring phrases were useful. She kept an arsenal handy for lagging chatter or to cover awkward transitions. She knew how to keep a conversation moving, and she knew how to wrap things up. She could engage and detach in one fell swoop. Inane arguments, whether at her dinner table or on the nightly news, would end not with her opinion, but with a declaration that semantics is the problem with the world today. It wasn't a particularly revealing insight, but it did make you stop to wonder what semantics was. She loved to spin classic proverbs with a turn that you didn't anticipate, always short of crass, but often glancing toward coy. Well, people who live in glass houses shouldn't take baths in the daytime. And when conversation about large feet ensued, comes up more than you'd think in a family of 10 siblings, she'd tap the wisdom of her father and say, "You know what they say about men with large shoe sizes? They can kill a lot of ants in the summertime." Now, sometimes she'd get political, but not too political. When given the opportunity to take a trip to the UK, she declared, "I'm not going to England until they let my people go." Her people were the Irish. Well, some of her people, and it was a couple generations back. And they were apparently still being oppressed a la Cromwell by the English. My sister Patty and I quickly revised the lyrics of the old spiritual and sang, "When Sheila was in England, let my people go." Eventually, my parents did visit England, just a few stops on a cruise, not a slash and burn campaign on behalf of the suffering Gaels. She loved to tell the story about subtly, read passive aggressively, wrangling with a tour guide over the proper honorifics for Thomas More. When the guide referred to Sir Thomas More, she pointedly corrected him, doing her part in the centuries-old Catholic-Protestant standoff with a clipped Saint Thomas More. When my mom was 18, her mother gave her a subscription to Good Housekeeping, which she maintained for decades, but the magazine crossed a line. When an agent called to ask if she wanted to renew her subscription, she said no. And here in her retelling, she would shift her weight and tone, assuming what I can only think of as her over-the-phone power pose. I wouldn't. She described to the unwitting agent on the phone a recent cover of the magazine that featured Princess Diana, Princess Charles, the Lady Diana, as she would in other contexts correct you. "Don't you people know we had a revolution? We don't have to pay attention to those people anymore." When she retold the story over dinner with Mrs. Crump, one of her closest friends, and a fixture in family lore, my sister and I cringed while Mrs. Crump cheered her on. She was a well-read woman and spoke with real authority, but once in a while, I'd hope she would cite her sources. She wouldn't travel to France because, well, they never paid their war debts, or Japan, until they opened up free trade for rice and computer chips. I was let's say, lucky to inspire in my mother two unique turns of phrase. At my divinity school graduation, each of us was invited to submit a 25-word message to be read while we walked to the dais to receive our diplomas. Because I hadn't secured a job or a place in another graduate program just yet, as I walked to the stage, the dean of students read, "While pursuing his dream as a lounge singer with an NPR talk show, Bill will pursue paths in interreligious dialogue, Catholic education, and queer activism." Most folks laughed along with the juxtaposition of my dream job and three seemingly unrelated trajectories, but I could hear and feel my mother's gasp, partial shock, queer was not in her vocabulary, and a little bit of delight in the wit and economy of words that I learned from her, punctuated by a cluck of her tongue. Classic Sheila. Having heard a diverse range of academic foci on professional directions, one stuck out to her. When I found them after the ceremony, her initial response was, "Well, congratulations, that was lovely. Now, what the hell is ecofeminist spirituality?" A few months later, as coverage of planes striking the Twin Towers spread, My mother called me and left a message on my voicemail. Well, happy birthday on this awful, awful day. That was the whole message. I forwarded the message to multiple friends who needed something to laugh at, and I can still do a perfect imitation. Dark, I know, but it's made people cackle.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. And I bet your impersonation was spot on.
It really is.
Once again, what's the title of your book?
Six to carry the casket and one to say the mass.
And
Reflections on life, identity, and moving forward.
and why that title?
So later in that essay, I explained the origin of the title. When people met my mom and found out that she had so many children, I mean, she got all sorts of shock and awe at having had 10 children, and sometimes she like I said, she could shut down a conversation really quickly and move on to the next track. So people would be like, 10 children? How do you have 10 children? And she'd lean in and say, well, they were from my husband's first marriage. Which was true because she was her husband's first marriage, but it was a way to be wait, what? Huh? And then she was able to shift topic. But seven sons, having had seven sons, that was amazing to a lot of people. And her response was always, well, God gave me seven sons for a reason. Six to carry the casket and one to say the mass. So it's a little insight into my mom's sense of humor, which is very Irish Catholic. It's a little
Mhm.
morbid. I like to joke that she trained us for her death from the moment we were born. So things like that, we'd hear a reading or a song, and she'd say, "Oh, play that at my funeral." Like, "Oh, I want that at my funeral." So it was a funny quip to be able to say, "Oh, you have seven sons. What's that about?" Well, I'm going to get a priest somewhere in here. So six are going to carry me to my grave, and one's going to be able to say the funeral. Now, I also
Very
chose
clever.
that title because it points to one of my first identities. I absorbed, by the time I was conscious, my older brothers, it was clear they were not heading toward the priesthood. So I think I absorbed it as, well, maybe this is what mom hopes for me. She thinks she's finally going to get a priest. I'm the closest she got, but I never actually pursued ordination.
Interesting. Interesting. So, okay, so one of the things that you mentioned on this form of mine was that you are a ritual designer. Can you share a little bit more about what that entails?
Sure. When I was looking for a new direction to go, I had taken time off and I thought I was going to be running back to schools and I was not. And so I went back to my first love, which is ritual. I did a master's in the comparative study of religion, and my focus was on ritual and how we use ritual to shape culture, to build culture, to build communities, to establish and strengthen relationships, all different kinds of culture, rituals. And and over time, when I was a teacher, I designed ceremonies and officiated weddings for friends who were they wanted to do an interfaith or intercultural ceremony. They didn't know how to do it, or they just wanted somebody trusted, and they knew that I had a background in it. So I started doing weddings for friends, and it really planted a seed in me, um, that to think about. There was this need for people who they didn't have a tradition to draw on, or they didn't want to draw on the tradition that they were given, or they want to do something interfaith or intercultural, and that's not always welcome in different contexts. And they also didn't want to just land at a justice of the peace or at a courthouse. They wanted a wedding, they wanted a meaningful experience, but they didn't want the tradition. So there are those people who want that.
Mm,
So when I was looking for something to do, I thought, well, maybe I'll hang the sign on the door and see if anybody needs a ritual or needs a ceremony. And it's been really wonderful. My focus is most of my work is weddings, and I work with couples who, like I said, don't have a tradition to draw on, and they want to do something maybe interfaith, maybe intercultural, or most importantly, they just want something that's really authentically them.
mm,
So my starting point is always that I want to design a ceremony that reflects the experiences and the identities and the values of the people at the center of the experience. Now, with weddings, that's an interesting case because a lot of the wedding traditions that we use in American weddings, a lot of the practices are inherited from very different times and places, and they carry with them really troubling values. A lot of things that we associate with weddings are either rooted in European royal courts, like the court culture, like a bride and a groom having an entourage and matching outfits. That's totally an imitation of, being king and queen for a day. And so you get to have your bridesmaids, you get to have your ladies in waiting treat you like the queen for the day. And if you're a monarchist and if you like European royal courts, that's great. But for those of us who don't, like, well, what do we do? How do we create meaningful traditions that don't carry forward these connotations? A lot of wedding traditions are plainly misogynistic. There's that moment that a lot of people have a lot of sentimental attachment where a father walking his daughter bride down the aisle, and it's a beautiful moment that all the commercials tell us should make us weep. But that's a vestige of when a wedding was basically a transaction between, a woman's first owner and her new owner. And so I want to challenge those traditions, not necessarily wipe them away because they're familiar, but how can we reframe them? How can we recreate them so that we can use what's valuable and meaningful and sentimental, but also that we can leave some of the misogyny behind, leave some of the more troubling parts behind. So my practice of ritual design is, like I said, mostly weddings, but I also have done funerals and other kinds of experiences. Um, my approach is always who's at the center and what are the values, what are the identities, what are the experiences that have shaped those people, and how can we echo that in the experience that we create.
That's very cool. I've never heard of a ritual designer until now.
There aren't many of us.
I was gonna say, how many are there out there? Which is great. Okay, so Bill, as we wrap up, are there any topics that we didn't cover that you want to talk about?
Oh gosh, I think
No?
we covered a whole lot. Let's see, we covered the gay stuff, we covered a little Catholic stuff, we covered a little writing stuff, we did a little ritual stuff. Yeah, is there anything else that you want to know?
Well, a little bit about the writing stuff. What was your writing journey like in terms of getting published? Working with a publisher. Did you indie, hybrid, traditional? What was it like?
I ended up working with an independent publisher, and I'm so happy and so grateful for it. I had gone to, when I started to see the book start to emerge, I thought, okay, well, how do I publish a book? I don't know how to do this. So I did a couple of workshops, and there, there's some great places in Seattle. A lot of writers, a lot of people wanting to share their expertise, and so I was trying to tap into all that. I was doing all sorts of book proposals, and I was trying to find a literary agent. I was trying to find a publishing house, and I sent it out to a bunch of directions, and I was getting nothing. And then I was driving home, and I was at a stoplight near Green Lake. If you're in Seattle, Green Lake is this beautiful, beautiful, lovely corner of the world. So I'm at the stoplight at Green Lake, and on the radio, I was listening to the local NPR station, and Butter Publishing had a spot, a sponsor spot saying, Peanut Butter Publishing looking for new authors with works at any stage in the editing process. And I thought, I love peanut butter. That's a good sign. So, so I thought,
Good
and
thing
I
you're
looked
not
them
allergic
up
to peanut
and
butter.
like, okay, this seems legit. And so I reached out, and then within 24 hours, I had an email back, and the process was underway. I was really lucky to be in a position that I could work with an independent publisher because uh, it's a small operation, and so I was able to work really closely with my editor and with Danielle and with the publisher Elliot and the whole team that they've got. I was able to work really closely with them. They were really responsive and supportive. Um, but it's an expensive process, and it's my mom, when she died, left a little bit of money for each of us with a note on it saying that it couldn't be to pay the bills, it couldn't be debt service, it couldn't be, the normal ordinary expenses. It had to be for something special.
Mm.
And so that was I hadn't known what I was going to do with that little bit of money, and then this whole book process landed at the foot at the door of Peanut Butter Publishing. I thought, well, Mom, you're publishing a book. So
What a gift.
so
That's
on
amazing.
top of it all, I'm grateful that my mother paid for this book. But
Yeah.
the for me the process of working with Peanut Butter Publishing was really positive. I really enjoyed them.
Good.
And it saved me a lot of the stress of I respect the writers who find the literary agents and work really hard to get the publishing houses, but I'm not a full-time writer. I don't have, finding a literary agent was a full-time job alone. So to be able to maintain the rest of my life and to be able to take on this project, yeah, it's really been a beautiful experience.
Great. And do you think you have any more books in you?
I sure hope so.
Yeah.
I've got two that I'm planning right now. One is a book about weddings. I'm in the wedding season sort of runs from June through September, October, and then there's a lull. There's very few big event weddings are happening during the winter and early spring. And so uh, during wedding season, all my energy is focused on wedding season, and then the rest of it, I get to focus on all the other stuff. So one of the books that I'm working on is weddings, and it's not necessarily an event planning guide, but an
Mhm.
approach to weddings that is rooted in my own philosophy, my own approach that I described. And then the other book that may be a little bit further down the line would be a similar to Six to Carry the Casket, a collection of essays about teaching and learning and my experience as a student, my experience as an educator, as an administrator, and in particular my experience being away from education for a while and what I've learned. So those are hopefully on the horizon in the next couple laps around the sun.
Okay. Well, good luck to you. That sounds amazing.
Thank
And
you.
hopefully it's not ahead of a pandemic or anything like that. But I wish you smooth sailing ahead for those books.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So where can folks find you to learn more about your projects?
My website is a great place to start, billhulseman.com. My Instagram is pretty active, Bill Hulseman Rituals, and both about my ritual design business and also anything attached to the book. I've been posting a lot on Instagram. So those would be great places to find me.
Fantastic. Thanks, Bill. All right, listeners, thanks for joining. Thank you, Bill, for being on our show and for sharing your powerful journey through grief, identity, and the rituals that help us to carry on. Listeners, if Bill's story resonated with you, I encourage you to pick up his memoir. Again, it's Six to Carry the Casket and One to Say the Mass. And please reflect on your journey as well on healing and belonging. As always, thank you for joining Quixotic Heights. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend, leave a review. Do leave a review for Bill's book as well. And then also please subscribe so you don't miss the next conversation. And with that, thank you so much and go and enjoy your day. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.